Hi class, welcome to Module 6. So we're looking at Chapter 7. So they get a little confusing as you look for the modules that have multiple chapters coming into place. Our numbers get thrown off a little. Also, a quick reminder is this is the last module before your midterm exam, and you'll be coming up on that when this module is finished. And that is a multiple choice and essay exam. Remember, the essays are equal to the multiple choice as far as percentage wise. So 50% in essay, 50% in multiple choice. And you'll have the due dates coming up for those and are clearly marked on your D2L. But we're talking about families today as we look at this module. And families are wonderful things. They provide the social support for children growing up. They are support throughout a lifetime. They are important to understand that they're the economic structure, that if we're born into a middle class home, we are more likely to stay in that middle class category. We're likely to have our advantages based on that. We've talked some about poverty in the past, and those born in poverty are more likely to stay in poverty. So all of these things come into place as we start looking at family and the family issues. Now, as with everything in social problems, we often look at the most negative events that occur. There are wonderful things about families, but we'll be looking at those negative pieces. And it already can jump into your mind. Families who fail to take care of their children, families where there's drug and alcohol abuse, which we'll get into later, where there's spousal abuse and problems related to that. That's what we'll be exploring as we look at the social problems that families face. So with that said, let me pop over to the PowerPoint. Now I'm in my office, so things will look slightly different than when I do it in my studio at home. My internet is out of whack, and hopefully it will be back up in a few days. And we'll be back to recording in a different environment that I can flip a little easier. So what's the definition of family? Well, if we look at the government explanation what a family is, it's somebody related by blood or by law. And so typically it would be a marriage situation where a man and a woman are married and biologically have a child, or they adopt a child. But family is beyond that, isn't it? We see extended families that include grandparents, aunts, uncles, single parents with children, same-sex couples. We know that the marriage status has changed in the United States for same-sex couples, which is part of the issues that we look at in family. We obviously have a course in family that takes a whole semester and still doesn't cover everything as we start looking at the differences and what comes into place and what we expect. So family definition is a constructed definition of the both relationship of our emotional and economic. Now think about this. When we talked about race, when we talked about gender, when we talked about aging, it's a social construction. So what's family? Family is very different depending on where we come from and how we view it. Family can be very extended, and family can be people that we're not related to, especially for our definition here in sociology, that we become this economic unit that can be in place. So we have this bond and this kinship that come into place. As my children were growing up, I had extra children in place. They were not biologically mine, but they still, all these years later, still contact me, and we still have a regular involvement, and I'm still very involved in their children's lives as we look at that change, how we become family. And sometimes we set up our family away from our family to protect ourselves. So what does it mean for us? Pretty simple, that the notion of family, the traditional family, has really changed, hasn't it? And is growing diverse forms of family. So there's this image of nuclear family, mother, father, and children all together as the ideal family. And there's been a great deal of change in that, isn't it? So we see this increase of families that are composed of couples that look differently. So there's the percentage of families composed of married couples with children. Today are only 21% of the family units. There's an increase of family groups in other categories, and that's mother and father, man and wife together with no children present. We can see that with our aging families that that makes a different situation. We have cohabitation in place, and we have that changing perspective as well towards what families are today, and they can be same-sex couples as well. So, the socially constructed belief that we tend to believe that families of the past were better and happier than today. That's part of our issues. Were they? In reality, when we go back and we know how difficult family was, and again, think about this, we just don't have enough time to cover this all. But in the past, there was not necessarily that we married for love, that we married for convenience, who was located, who would work together on the farm or in our industry with us, that there was a very different place, that families, we believe, should be safe havens to protect their members from harm. And that has not always been the situation either. We assume that families and their failings lead to many of our social problems, that the fact that parents don't provide for their children or they don't do good parenting, that this is why children become criminals or in trouble. And that is not always the situation. And there's this persistent belief that non-traditional families, especially divorced, fatherless, working mothers, threaten to erode society. It's interesting as you start thinking about your position paper down the road. I had a student write up, and she took a very strong position about belief that a woman needs to stay at home and that she needs to support this family. She followed this social constructed belief, and she believed that women did not deserve equal pay because their value was elsewhere. In the process, you see the beliefs that construct families affect the beliefs that we have about other systems. So the functionalist theory looks at family as the most vital institution of all institutions, more important than education, more important than all of those other things coming into place, because family confers our social status, it defines who we are and our place in society, and it looks for those roles, and that it's family function in concert with other institutions that contribute to the problems of society as we change the function of family. Now think about it. We haven't talked about this a lot in my videos, but most sociologists are not functionalists. We look at the functionalist perspective to understand the view of society. But we do see that families and their social and emotional functions being difficult can lead to some of those other social problems that we have already talked about and will be talking about at such large levels. And so this gives us a theory to look at that particular piece. Conflicts theorists and feminists, as we put these together, look at family as a system of inequality where conflict is normal. And we see the difference of power coming into place. Here, instead of the powerful being rich, it is the male and female difference in the genre of gender. So the men maintain their power over the family. When Engels is writing with Marx, he even states that the worst place for a woman to be was in a marriage relationship, because at that point she had no substantial standing. Everything she owned belonged to her husband, and she had to work. You think about it, even today, many of the things that we talk about, the inequality issues faced in gender, still come out of this struggle of who has the power in the home and who does the work within that process. Interactionist perspective look at the social interaction, helps us to create and maintain and define our families. And that there's this ever changing look at where family is, and within the families, there's this interaction of words and symbols that define our expectations, and problems arise when there's conflict about how family is defined. So think about this in the case of parents coming from different backgrounds, and how do you define family, and whose family, and who belongs, and what fits into the process. So what are the social problems we're facing? Well, in 1970s, divorce was rare. If you went around our classroom and you said, was anyone from a divorced family? The likelihood is you'd have one hand out of 40. Today, that's not the situation, is it? Rising divorce rates are attributed to no-fault divorce laws. Now, no-fault divorce laws came into effect in the 1960s and 70s, and basically they took away blaming someone for the dissolution of a marriage. In the past, you had to show that that person had cheated on you, failed to support you, and divorce was a long drawn out process, oftentimes 2 and 3 years. No fault divorce allowed divorce to occur faster. It also allowed that separation and support issues to arise from that. There is also the economic independence that came along with more women entering the workforce in the 1960s and 70s, and the change of education. More women getting higher education degrees affected the family as well. And so we see these changes affect families. Divorce. For those that marry younger than the age of 20, higher rates of divorce exist. Those living in poverty have higher rates of divorce. Those with a high school degree in some college have higher. We see the continuing pattern here of those that are disadvantaged, oftentimes having higher divorce rate. So we see divorce rates are higher among those working full time. We see this status come into place, and children with divorced parents have moderately poorer lives and educational outcomes. In fact, children are much more likely to be in poverty coming out of a single parent family than they are out of a two-parent family. So we see that significant difference coming into place. So there's significant difference, the higher divorce rate. So some of the solutions that have been suggested here are that we need to change the divorce laws and require people to stay married longer. Perhaps the issue should be more, should we consider how we enter marriage and the counseling that comes into place. Negative effects also occur within the family. Now, consider the difference of where women now stand today, or men as well. That intimate partner violence has always been going on, but was not always considered a social problem. It was part of marriage. It was what was to be expected, that women were property, and in fact did not have those rights. Remember, as we look for the women's rights issue coming across, that part of the issue were related to that. In fact, we did not even have rape law that related to spousal rape until the last 20 years. That if you're married, it was never rape, and that was your place. Now that's changed. We now see this as a social problem, and that's what you'll be looking at, a few of those things, as you look at the statistics within this chapter. The other issue, one of the other major issues we look at, is abuse of children. Child abuse is 15 times more likely to occur when there's spousal abuse, and we see that children that are abused are more likely to be abused by their father than their mother. What's interesting is if we look at those statistics, the youngest children are more likely to be abused by their mother or hurt by their mother than their father, because they provide that caregiving and they get so frustrated and exhausted. Neglect is the failure to provide children's basic needs, and so we have the issues of abuse and neglect, and within this we see such things as sexual assault for children, all of the concerns that come into place. Elder abuse is also a significant issue in family. Now, we think about elder abuse and we think about them being mismanaged in a nursing home and someone not caring for them and that abuse occurring. But the majority of elder abuse occurs at home and it's domestic elder abuse. Um, and with abuse, we follow the same things that we look at with child abuse. We look at neglect, we look at abuse, and we look at exploitation with older adults because we have this issue of taking their money. Teen pregnancy is a significant issue or a significant social problem. And in the past, we've had issue of newborn abandonment, still with some problems today, but we've changed the abandonment laws that come into place. And with that, it's been interesting to see what has occurred in some states where they've eliminated even the age you could abandon families where they have abandoned their teen children as well. So there's some real problems. There's the problem of time and money, how to manage. Mothers spend an average of 13 hours a week with their children compared to fathers, and yet women are working almost the same amount of hours as men, about 38 hours to 42 for men in a week. And so we see this significantly, the burden of care, the issue of family work. As I said, not going to cover it all here as you start looking at it, but as you start exploring this topic, and let me pull this back into place, um, this week, this 2 days that you get for your module, I want you to look at a few things. Now, the first one is Kelsey's story, and it is a true story of child abuse, and very tear-jerking. I could give you so many of these as you go through. The second are two different videos. One, the original video on Susan Stills, and the second one, which is the picture here. This one you can pop into just by clicking on. And then you have two videos to watch related to violence against women and the chain of pain for children. Remember, families are very powerful and can be very much the issue of problem solving for all of our social problems. But when families aren't working, they create some significant problems. So when you pop over to your discussion board this week, you're going to be addressing some of those issues as you look at the American family. Some say it's dying. What issues affect this changing family, and what do we need to do to strengthen? So there's a lot of questions here in your discussion board as we start to look at this social system. And can other social systems replace it? I hope you have a great day, and thank you.